Safety valve standing by.
Professor Gabriel Krafft, 11th of March 1944. I'm creating a record of my involvement with the SS unit, Die Wahrheit. As this may one day be called into question, and I probably won't be around to explain myself. In early September of 1939, I was in my office at the University of Leipzig with my assistant Franz. We were translating an ancient Sumerian scroll when a man walked in, unannounced. He said I must immediately tender my resignation, pack a suitcase, and depart for an overseas trip as an advisor to the SS battalion Die Wahrheit. That was the first time I met Oberfuhrer Wolfram von List. All I saw was a uniform and a perfect haircut. I had no idea what lay behind those icy blue eyes. I actually laughed. I had heard of his battalion, whose name perversely means the truth. They raided antiquities around the world, looking for evidence to support their belief in an Aryan master race. I waved him away, saying I had no desire to help Reichsfuhrer Himmler twist history to fit the Nazi narrative. Von List calmly drew and shot poor Franz in the head. His voice was perfectly calm. Do I have your attention now, Herr Professor? Gabriel Krafft, Audio Memoir Part 2. After shooting my assistant, von List had me dragged out of Leipzig University and thrown in an SS prison. There were a dozen other experts already there, recruited from museums and universities across the Reich to assist the SS unit, Die Wahrheit. They were explorers, historians, archaeologists, and so on. Many looked beaten. All looked frightened. Hung on the wall was a map of the world with notes and drawings next to different locations, things like the Grail, Thor's Hammer, Atlantis, Shangri-La. We wondered if this was a joke. But when von List arrived, he was dead serious. The Oberfuhrer ordered us to help his troops find the places on that map and retrieve those relics. It made no difference that they did not exist. We would deliver them, or else. The others agreed, filed out to do his bidding. They were not stupid men. I alone defied von List. I said, I know what your Nazis are doing. I've seen friends and neighbors taken away. I've heard what happens at your camps, and I would rather die than help you. Von List showed a flash of anger. But then he smiled. He was amused. I actually thought I had a say in my own fate. Krafft entry number 3. I was surprised von List did not shoot me. I had refused to serve him twice. Instead, sent his men to my home. They broke down the door and took my spouse to an SS interrogation chamber. I had put my values and dignity ahead of my own life. So von List made someone else pay for my stubbornness. Should I refuse to help Die Wahrheit or drag my feet in any way, the love of my life would be slowly tortured to death. Of course I complied. How could I do otherwise? But I also made a silent promise to myself. I would learn of Die Wahrheit's secrets. If we found anything of real value, I would turn it against them. Somehow, I would destroy von List and his Nazi thugs from within.
shut up. There's killing to be done.
Gabriel Krafft, or the
I
old
shall
Memoir
enjoy
Part 4.
watching you die.
Once von List forced my cooperation.
Watch out.
My first
These
assignment
things pack
for
a
the
wallop.
Wahrheit was to decipher a document seized at the
That's
infamous
quite enough of that.
Hotel Royal in Paris. Well, infamous to someone like me, who spent a career studying groups that dabbled in, for want of a better term, the occult. I dislike that word. Practitioners of what some condemn as witchcraft are usually ordinary folk. They just approach the divine in a different way than their neighbors at the cathedral. The Society Occult, on the other hand, had no such problem with the word. Their wealth and power protected them from your average pitchfork mob, and they sought to use dark magic as a means of extending their influence. I knew at once the documents were pages from the Society's fabled Tome of Rituals. It was a so-called spell
Is it
book
really suicide when
compiled
they're
over
already dead?
centuries. Only their inner circle had ever seen
I'll put
it.
you all back
But
in your
something
graves
terrible
if it's
happened
the
back
last
in
thing
the
I do.
20s. Some crisis that compelled the Society to take the book apart and hide the pages in sacred places around the world. Because I recognized the pages,
Carving
I was
my own
rewarded
valley
with
of
the
death.
task of tracking more down and reconstituting the book. As he often reminded me,
Wonder if they feel
von
deja
List
vu.
had my beloved Sasha under arrest. Succeeding at my task was my only chance to keep us both alive. Gabriel Krafft, Audio Memoir Part 5. My servitude to the Wahrheit was almost over before it truly began. I was tasked with gathering the lost pages of the Tome of Rituals, but I had no idea where to start. All I had was a few pages already in von List's possession. Von had notes scribbled in the margin, and just as von List began threatening to execute my poor Sasha, I recognized that handwriting. One of the patrons of my university was an amateur demonologist. The hobbies of the idle rich. Anyhow, he must have once possessed the pages to have jotted down those notes. Von List had him arrested and tortured. He revealed he had been a member of the Society, one entrusted with hiding tome pages. He listed others who also possessed a few. With enough pages, I deduced the locations of various artifacts listed within them. For a time, I was von List's most valuable helper. He rewarded me with a letter from Sasha. Proof of life, he called it. I tried not to weep as I read it. Von List hated that. But things turned for the worse when none of the artifacts seemed to have any power. I had made a devil's bargain to keep my beloved alive. But my luck was running out. Krafft, entry number 6. I had found von List the artifacts in the Tome of Rituals. They proved as useless as the rest of the relics the Wahrheit plundered. He looked at me with more disgust than usual, losing faith in me. The moment I was no longer useful would be the end of me, and my Sasha. Though we were never officially married, and we kept our union from prying eyes, Sasha was my spouse. I could not give up until we were reunited. But the search for a mystical Wunderwaffe to save the Reich was based on the delusions of a Nazi death cult. I was beginning to despair, and then the incident at Project N Station punched a hole into the dark ether, awakening the artifacts in the blink of an eye. My fear I was not producing results became abject terror, that I had handed Wolfram von List the ultimate weapon. Greetings. I am Professor Gabriel Krafft. I presume you came in response to my message. The one I radioed just before the containment spell went up. I had hoped for a larger fighting force, but I already see you are no ordinary soldiers. Perhaps you will be enough. But we have quite a challenge ahead. You see, our mission is to stop the man responsible for the nightmare unfolding all around you. The commanding officer of the SS Battalion de Wahrheit. The murderer who has now bonded with an ancient evil. Oberfuhrer Wolfram von List. Left unchecked, he will single-handedly win the war for the Nazis. That may sound preposterous, but I assure you, it is true. In any case, thanks to the containment spell, we are cut off from the outside world. Unable to summon reinforcements, or further warn your superiors. Success or failure is solely up to us. Gabriel Krafft to Special Forces. By now you know the dark ether entities dwelling within you have visited our world before. Those who could perceive them have mistaken them for ghosts, deities, even angels. My own description of them as demons owes more to my academic background than to any belief they are infernal in origin. But we all see the world through our own lens. One can hardly blame a Viking for seeing Nauticus as a frost giant, or the ancient Greeks for thinking Invicta was the war god Ares. My point is that our own biases color how we see them. You hear demon and you think evil. The truth is much more nuanced. These are immortal beings from another universe, as capable of benevolence as they are of doing harm. In short, they do not share our sense of right and wrong. So never forget, these are not demons in some biblical sense of the word. They are your partners. Their hatred of Cortiflex assures that our goals are aligned. This is Krafft, with some background on the artifacts you carry. They were used by ancient priests, sorcerers, in places as far-flung as the Yucatan and the islands of Japan. They were said to commune with angels, summon demons. But when we unearthed these artifacts, we were faced with a mystery. There were strange design details, markings, and materials that simply did not fit the cultures that claimed them. These objects were anomalies, anachronisms. They did not belong in those settings. They were alien. I have since confirmed the artifacts were created in the dark ether dimension. They were cast by inhuman hands, in forms meant to appeal to human aesthetics. Small wonder they got the details wrong. They allowed beings who could not come here physically to visit as spirits and bond with mortal flesh. Some, like Cortiflex, were cruel, controlling. Others, like Bellica, were kind, benevolent. Alas, these relics became their prisons. Each demon is now trapped like the proverbial genie in a lamp. Safeguard your artifacts. Study them. Learn to unlock their powers. Just don't try to sense them. Any appraiser versus souls would dismiss them as forgeries. And in a sense, Krafft here. As you well know, this area is swarming with revenants. I just want to reassure you that I myself am quite safe for the moment. Since the day the artifacts awoke, Von List kept me by his side. After all, I'm as close as there is to an expert on the entity dwelling within him. When we arrived here in Stalingrad, it took the locals by surprise. The last thing they expected was the Nazis to return. But von List had been here when the Germans surrendered. He wants to turn the site of their greatest loss into the source of Nazi victory. To do this, he will raise an army of revenants from the millions who perished on the Eastern Front. But to accomplish such a feat, Kortifex must first build up his strength. Von List locked me in this room with my books and the radio. I watched from my window as he called upon Kortifex to seal off this part of the city. And I knew I had to act. Once I radioed for help, I used what I learned from the Tome of Rituals. The rune magic in its pages sealed this room. Of course, I have no idea how to undo the spell, but for now, neither von List nor his revenants can touch me here. Now that you have responded to my cry for help, we must work together. We must stall their progress and gather information on Devorheit's activities. I will continue to advise you while I formulate a plan to stop them once and for all. Till then, keep fighting, my champions. We must strengthen your demons if we have any hope of winning. Krafft here. I have been thinking about something that happened when the artifacts awakened. Von List bonded with Kortifex. One of the first things he did was to gather all the pages from the Tome of Rituals. It led us to the scepter of Kortifex and locked them away in his office. I stayed out of his way. Frankly, I was terrified. The man was already dangerous. But now, there was a light in those pale blue eyes. Well, you get the idea. But in hiding the origins of the scepter, von List raised some troubling questions. Was there some vulnerability mentioned in those pages? Some threat to his plans? I was not on the expedition that recovered the scepter. All I know is it was found in Egypt's eastern desert, far from the great cities of antiquity. I heard there was a temple to Osiris there, long forgotten and not mentioned in ancient records. I suspect those pages may provide a breakthrough for our new resistance movement. There must be some reason von List hid them. Just something to keep in mind as we search for a way to stop Devorheit before the worst can come to pass.